Hi guys, Togo here with a new video, and this video will be a solo shuffle tier list prediction video for season 3 of Dragonflight. And there are many changes for 10.2. There are a lot of class balancing that are quite important, and some which are untouched or feels like it's gonna be the same for next season. But I'm going to try to do it a quick fire tier list. Although I know myself, I do ramble a lot about the specs because I do like to explain why I put a certain spec into a certain tier. So if you do love that, please watch the whole video instead of skipping and then asking why. I prefer you guys to watch and then have a discussion with me. But let's start by doing some pre-notes about the tier list. First and foremost, I'm not going to rate the tanks. Not that I don't like tanks, it's more or less that it's very hard to predict something that is really unpredictable. I think tanks, either it's going to be very strong and people will not see it and will see it once it's live, or tanks are completely bad, but you will also see it once it's live, once you have played versus a blood DK and you know, okay, he is killable, or okay, he's very annoying, or okay, he has more throughput than just being there. Then you know, right? But at that point, I don't want to predict something where I really do not know. I also want to talk first and foremost about augmentation. I still think augmentation is S tier. I might make more tiers going into the tier, but pretty much S tier means that it is God tier, A tier means it's meta, B tier means it's average, and C tier it means average to good. Again, it can be also a good spec at B tier, but it's not meta. And C tier means that it is really bad, to be honest, or underwhelming and needs help. But I'll also specify every single spec. Augmentation is still going to be very strong, although they got some nerfs. It looks like more of PvE nerfs and not really PvP nerfs. From the looks of it, it's still very strong in SOLOQ RPG, but this is a solo shuffle tier list, so if you want to see the SOLOQ RPG, I've made one a few weeks ago, you can check that out, but I will make it a bit more of a updated one once it's out, once we have 7th of November 10.2. But augmentation is still very strong, has a lot of utility. It's still making the game very dampening. I wish augmentation wasn't really there. The only issue is they make a support spec into a version of the game which doesn't really support the support spec. If you had more options to a support spec, so it means that you have a support spec for Demonology, for warlocks, a support spec for priest, a support spec for hunter, then I would maybe accept it a bit more. But since it's the monopoly of the support genre, it feels really bad to play against. You don't really have all the options available to stop it. Devastation Evoker, I feel like it's going to be very strong in SOLOQ RPG. Don't get me wrong, because I did rate them very high in SOLOQ RPG because it has a lot of throughput, and again in SOLOQ RPG you're held by your front lines, by your 1v1s, 1v2s. Devastation Evoker is actually very strong in those situations, so I'm still going to put it in C tier because I do feel like it's still a gimmick, especially in solo shuffle, where it's like you burst and you kill someone, or you're pretty much on the back foot the whole game because they are going to focus you. You're very good versus a few specs, and you can have very good lobbies as Devastation Evoker, but I still feel like you're throwing a coin and you are going to say head of or tail, and at one point you will have the luck about the lobby or not. I was a bit thinking, because in French or in Dutch it's a different saying, but head or tail, and I feel like currently it's really random if you have a good lobby or not. It's really not like a 50% either you have a good lobby or not for Devastation. I want to talk about Preservation Evoker as well, because we are going to finish the Evokers. I think it's a very strong spec. I think it's very strong in SOLOQ RPG. I think in Solo Shuffle, it still has the USPs, so the unique selling points for a healer that is actually very aggressive. I think you have a lot of options to make your team survive. I don't know if it's going to be S tier. I want to put it in S tier, but I'm going to put it in A tier, maybe put it in A+, because I feel like there are other heals that are doing very well. You as a Preservation Evoker have the luxury to actually counter Restoration Druids pretty hard, and that's a good thing because Restoration Druid is currently very popular because of their power, power level just in healing. And I feel like that can push you into S tier category, but I'm going to put it in A tier for now and see if it's going to be either better or not. I want to talk about warlock specs. I'm a very huge fan about warlock specs. Affliction warlock, destruction warlock. Demonology is not really my cup of tea, but I want to talk about Affliction warlock. There are a few things that are looking very fun to do. Now I don't know if it's going to be very effective for 3v3 because you do get buffed on unstable affliction, but you do get nerfed once you take the PvP talents, which enables you to put multiple unstable afflictions on multiple enemies. And that is an interesting interaction where you can have actually unstable affliction hit very hard in single target without the PvP talent. And then you have like the PvP talent, which in turn makes unstable affliction just a dispel protection kind of spell. But I still think in Soul Shuffle you have not really the luxury of having good lobbies. If you can have very bad ones, you can have very good ones. I think personally, whenever I'm playing castle lobbies, Affliction Warlock is really doing well. And versus a melee lobby, depends on which one you are actually fighting. But I mean, a warrior just cuts you through. You have a lot of good changes. You have more armor now, so it does equal to, I don't know, 10% or 15% damage reduction, I think, in total. Something like that, to physical damage. It's interesting, it's strong, but I do feel like it's going to be a B tier spec. It's good. B tier means it's good, but I don't think it's meta. I do feel like a meta spec has to have better like lobbies, and I do feel like Affliction Warlocks can have very bad ones, and it's more likely that you will have more bad ones because the specs that you are fighting are the more popular ones. Destruction Warlock, on the other hand, I think is A tier. Could be S tier, to be honest. Could be S tier. I could like have an argument where, since the damage from Destruction Warlock gets buffed in next patch, their cast time is nerfed because of like the Madness of Ajakir is not here anymore, so it means that you cannot cast a Chaos Bolt, like a second Chaos Bolt, very fast. But it still is an option where you can play still a lot of mastery and a lot of haste, or you can go full haste and then you feel no difference with the nerf, the removal of Madness of Ajakir. But I do feel like it's very strong because it has 3 schools of spells. It has a lot of great CC options, the same as Affliction Warlock, but at least whenever you get kicked unfair, you still have Chaos Bolt or Immolate, for example, or Incinerate. You have a lot of damage which can be instant but can also be casted. You have options, and you have also double coil, which is a thing that Affliction Warlock doesn't have and Demonology Warlock doesn't have as well. I do feel like you have the luxury of playing with the pet outside. So it means that you can send the pet on the healer. They don't get cleaved, and you can actually do reliable silences even when you are CC'd, which is a great thing. You can also play with the sacrifice pet again. It's also very interesting because it gives you more damage. But if you're CC'd, you cannot silence. So you have to see and work around it. I do feel like Destruction Warlock is a fantastic spec. It's unfortunate that they don't get a lot of like love on their tree because I feel like I still play the same builds every single game, and they have the same problem as BM Hunter where you have clearly a better path to go for, but at least they have a different path from PvE and PvP. But again, Destruction Warlock, Soul Shuffle, very strong. I think they benefit a lot of the things that are actually benefiting from Affliction Warlock, but they do get also a bit better lobbies. I feel like a melee lobby as a Destruction Warlock is not an insta loss, where Affliction Warlock can actually lose pretty hard versus those lobbies, in my opinion, in my experience as well. Demonology Warlock, I feel like you can judge the fun factor or the power factor. I feel like Demonology Warlock is not half bad. I know that some people are out crying because of the gameplay is not really fun, and it's a spreadsheet kind of gameplay where it's performing on a spreadsheet, but it's not performing in live because it doesn't feel fun to do. But that doesn't take away that they actually gave a lot of power, baseline to the tyrants, baseline to the demons, and you don't really have to think as much as previously. I remember tyrants was actually a very big thing where you had to play around it. also in Shadowlands, where you either played demon bolts, so with necro lords you could have decimating bolts where you have a lot of damage, or you were playing pretty much like tyrant build, which again was a great thing, but you had to build upon it. And right now you don't really have to build anything. I think it's capped, or maybe they uncapped it, but now you give way more power to your demons instead of your tyrants. Overall, I do feel like they're like a strong caster. I do feel like they still have the weird AI on their pets. I still think that I'm underestimating it, but it's more or like probably likely that I have a bias towards Demonology Warlock, not really liking that spec. So I'm gonna put it in B tier. I do feel like it's better than Affliction Warlock because of the CC options that you have, because of the damage that is actually just always there, even if you're CC'd, always if you're just trained, the damage is still going to be there. And you have multiple schools of spells, so if you're getting kicked on Shadow, you still have your Demon School. I don't know how it's called anymore. Shadow, not Shadow Flame, but something like that. And you still have options, right? So I think the Mojo Walk is a great spec in its own right, but I don't like how it plays, and maybe that's why I'm putting in B tier. But I feel like they are not in the greatest spot, but they are in a good spot where they're more likely getting buffed next patches instead of nerfs. So that's a good thing for a class picking decision, I would say. You don't really want to pick this S tier specs because they are going to be doomed at one point in the patch, so expect that. Let's talk about rogues. I think rogues is an interesting conversation. A lot of people are saying that Subtlety Rogue is S tier. I do feel like they are still, like in Solo Shuffle, very dependent of your teammates, but now a bit less. I think the damage is very, very high. I want to put it in S tier, but I'm gonna put it in S tier. Since it's a prediction, I'm gonna predict that it's very strong. You have builds where you can actually deal a lot of damage without like any preparation whatsoever. Yeah, Gorma is hitting like a truck. I think you have a lot of like combo points generator, so builders that are actually hitting for a lot, and then you have also your eviscerate doing a lot of damage. I do feel like a lot of people are actually going away from secret technique. I don't know if it's something that is really meta. We'll have to see if like Peekaboo makes a guide or whatever high tier rogue makes a guide. You will see probably the way how you can play Subtlety Rogue. I do feel like it's straightforward. Often not you have like one build which is probably the one build everyone's going to play, but right now it's very, very strong. I do feel like they're not really getting the bad things, the bad weaknesses from PvE whenever they're doing PvP. I do feel like Soul Shuffle is a good environment for a rogue in general, but they do get ruined by people that do stun for nothing on the kill target. But as a sub rogue, you have the luxury to actually like change targets whenever you want. You have Shadowy Duel, you still have Smoke Bomb. You can really choose a win just by being a rogue. Of course, it's one of the harder specs to play, in my opinion, because you can really, really feel like you're doing bad. But sometimes whenever it works, it does feel like it's a S tier spec. I'm going to put it in S tier. Assassination Rogue, my favorite rogue spec. If I find it, where is it? I must be blind. Where is Assassination Rogue? Here. Assassination Rogue, my most favorite spec. I do feel like it's fun to play. It's fun to execute your damage. I feel like you still have the problems where if you're facing a Paladin with Bob, you can actually remove a lot of stuff and just makes it a bit harder to play. But right now you can have actually a lot of damage on Envenoms and also a lot of damage on Mutilate, on Ambush, on your builders, and you have also a lot of damage on your bleeds. And then whenever you have your death markup, you can actually do a lot of damage like bursting. I think you are in a great spot. I don't think it's like going to be S tier, but I do feel like it's way better than previously. I do feel like it's an A tier spec. I do feel like right now the wave of Holy Paladins is kind of over. The people are just going on Resto Druid, they're going on Disc Priest, they're going on Evokers. but I do feel like right now you have good lobbies and then you have very bad ones, and you can feel like you're useless in those lobbies, but then you have to think about the lobbies where you were very much a god. I do feel like Assassination Rogue is actually doing a lot of damage. You have a lot of ways to play it too. You have also a lot of builds. If it's a fun tier list, I would say it's a S tier spec. I did make a top 5 of my most fun specs going into 10.2. So if you want to check that out, you can always check that out. Assassination Rogue is in that list, and there are many reasons why it's actually a very good spec. Outlaw Rogue, this one is the most hard one to predict. It's either going to be S tier or it's either going to be bad, just because it depends about the meta. Outlaw Rogue doesn't really have a lot of burst in general. It's really a dampening spec. You're trying to CC your targets. At one point, someone is going to die because of said CC. Now, there is also a buff towards the trinket for healers. Now you have a 1.5 minute CD. So it means that your CC is going to be less valuable in general. So I do feel like that is a big change for Outlaw Rogue. I do feel like, from what I've seen, it doesn't do like crazy damage. It does do a lot of like consistent damage though. I do feel like it's one of the specs that have the most consistent damage, but it's also based around RNG with Roll the Bones. I'm going to put it, because I want to give like some separation between the specs. I do feel like it's a B tier spec. It's not like, it's very hard to explain, right? I do feel like one of the better rogues on the planet will make them feel S tier, but you have to think about the average player. I do feel like the average player, whenever they're picking Outlaw Rogue, they are not going to perform as a S tier spec, because again, you're playing with average players against average players, so you are not going to have the benefit of how an Outlaw Rogue plays into those lobbies. That's why in threes, if you have like a good comp and you can make it work, Outlaw Rogue just performs way better than Soul Shuffle, because those CC options, because of the interactions with your team, you can actually win games pretty reliably because of that. But in Soul Shuffle, it's way different. Now let's talk about Shamans. Again, a spec in classes that a class and its specs that really are close to my heart. Elemental Shaman is going to be S tier. I know that some people are going to turn their eyes or whatever. It's really strong. You are one of the specs that don't really need to cast if you're playing the right build. You can also play a casted build where you're going to decimate people. It's more for solo QRBGs in my opinion, but you can decimate people with that. You have one of the most versatile stats line in the game. You can go full mastery, although I will not do that. Full crit for maximum lava burst damage with Ascendance, or you can go full haste, which is my personal preferred build, where you can actually just throw lava bursts every single second because of all the lava surges that you will get from your flame shocks. I do feel like the foresight is insane. I do feel like the damage overall is going to be a big win for Elemental Shaman. I think it has a disadvantage to die from stuns, but in Soul Shuffle, again, they have to capitalize on stuns, and often or not, it feels like you're stunning the healer more than the DPS, which personally I think it's better to stun the DPSs, because then you stop the damage output from the other team, so you can actually recover. But that's another play for another time. But I do feel like Elemental Shaman is actually a very good spec. It does a lot of damage. I made a preview about it, so if you want to check that out, you can, and you will see the damage output that it has. I do feel like overall the 10.2 patch is an overall big win for Elemental Shaman, and I'm looking forward to test it out in Soul Shuffle and SOLOQ RPGs. Enhancement Shaman, on the other hand, I do feel like the foresight is not really ideal for PvP, because you have to go for Primordial Wave. I do feel like Primordial Wave is not the easiest build to go for, especially in PvP. I do feel like, again, you also have a lot of choices in the stats. You can go for Mastery or you can go for Haste. I don't think Crit is worth it as an Enhancement Shaman. Overall, it's an RNG spec if you're going for Doom Winds, unfortunately. It can do a lot of damage with like proc of Ascendance, for example. I'm still going to play it. I don't think it's A tier. It's going to be B tier. I know, again, I'm going to say, every spec you're seeing on the screen, you can make it feel like S tier if you're like mastering 2D T. the specs that you're playing. If you're playing like Protection Paladin like a god, you can be rank 1 and you are going to make them feel like S tier. If you are like a rank 1 sub rogue, you're going to make it feel like a S tier spec. Same for Outlaw rogue, same for Demonology warlock. But you have to think about the average player. I do feel like the average player on Enhancement Shaman is going to die in stuns. They're going to throw heals and not do damage, or they're going to do damage and not throw heals. Your utility is actually based on your capacity to do a hex. But if you're like trained, are you going to cast a hex and lock you out of Nature School? Or are you going to bait the silences so you can actually have your healer heal you while you are silenced? But it's really not an easy spec. It's also filled of RNG. You can make them feel like gods with like a 1 second kill time, or you can make them feel like paper and hitting like paper whenever you don't have any procs and any luck with like multiple RNG aspects that the game actually proposes for Enhancement Shaman. I do feel like they still need a rework, but that's another conversation probably. But right now, Enhancement Shaman is in a good spot. It's not average, it's also not underwhelming, but I do feel like it's not meta, and that's why I'm putting it in B tier. Let's talk about Restoration Shaman. Restoration Shaman, currently, I feel it's not very strong in Solo Shuffle. All of your heals comes from your totems, which can be destroyed. I feel like if you want to have great throughput, you kind of have to cast, and if you get casted, like if you get silenced, you're pretty much doomed. You have a lot of utility spells, but they are like not hard stops like a Holy Paladin can do. Also, people can just like walk away of the ranges of your totems. For example, Earthen Wall, you have to displace it multiple times to actually have a lot of value on it. I'm going to put it in B tier because I do feel like it's not bad, like underwhelming, but I'm not going to say that it's like impressive either. I do feel like evokers have probably way more utility than Restoration Shaman, in my opinion. I also feel like in general it's way more easy for an evoker to do their CC than a Restoration Shaman, because they don't have a lot of hots compared to evokers. And I just in general feel like they have carry potential though, because they have lava bursts, they have like Stormkeepers. You can actually just one tap someone if you are like very lucky with your crits with Stormkeeper. But is it enough? I do feel like often not, if you're like going into dampening, you don't have your CDs anymore. Without CDs, Restoration Shaman is actually very hard to play, in my opinion. Let's talk about DKs. So I did a lot of testing on the PTR. Frost DK can be very surprising at how much damage you can do. I do feel like it's less cheesy right now because of the 4-set, but there's two worlds. There's one world where your DK is without a 4-set, and another world where you have a 4-set. I feel like Frost DK with 4-set is probably going to be B tier because of like how Chill Streak is going to be very interesting in 1v1 situations, especially versus casters. You don't really need to double grip anymore. But if you double grip Chill Streak, it can do a lot of damage. It will do a lot of damage. It will be very fatal. But if you are like in incapacity of doing that, because like people are like evading very well, or like they're like very slippery, you can actually do a Chill Streak in 1v1 and decimate someone. Now, it's a whole playstyle change. I don't know how much Frost DKs are going to do that, but in single target, if you're like having a good Chill Streak with a good Pillar of Frost, you're getting not disarmed at that point, you can actually do a lot of damage, and you can actually just like obliterate one guy or two guys in one team. The difficulty of a Frost DK is actually the defensives. It does feel like they kind of need to buff again Death Strike. I feel like Death Strike should be very much your defensive if they really want to make that like that, or you remove the defensive aspect of Death Strike and you put something else instead. But you kind of have to go hard on one aspect, or the other. Now you're right now in the middle ground where you're death striking to actually recover your HP, but the HP is not really worth to recover because someone is going to deal the same amount of damage that you recovered at one point. So I do feel like Frosty Decay is very strong offensively, very poor in defenses, and it's very scripted. Again, if you're playing versus an arms warrior and they are not disarming you, you're lucky, because they should always disarm you from the get-go whenever you have Pillar Frost. You have the same CD, by the way. So if you have like a disarm of 45 seconds, Pillar Frost is 1 minute, but can be reduced to probably around 40 seconds if you're lucky. I do feel like a warrior or a rogue or a Windwalker or whatever, if they're disarming you, you're pretty much like forced to trinket, so you become very predictable again. So I do feel like Frost Decay is in a average spot. It's not good. I think it's average. That's why it's like lower than Outlaw Rogue. But I'm going to explain it at the end of the video, where I see every single spec. Unholy Decay. So I tested a pet build, I tested the dot build, I tested the Unholy Decay damage build kinda. So it means that the Unholy Decay is going to deal the most damage, and then you have your pets, and then you have your diseases. Pet build is kinda dead. I feel like the CDs are way too long. I still think that it's very counterable. I also think that your dummy damage is never going to be the damage that you're actually going to do in PvP, because you're going to death strike, you're going to try to recover a lot of the things, you're going to try to survive, you're going to also get evaded by the enemy. So you're not never going to have like full value on Gargoyle, you're not going to have full value on your pets. So that's out of the way. I still think that the disease build is not really the way to go for Soul Shuffle anyways. And the personal build, so Festering Wounds, Deathcore, and Score Strike, or the Clawing Shadows build is probably the best one, because it does a lot of damage. I did like a 180k Clawing Shadow on a dummy, against a dummy, but it does a lot of damage. Deathcore critted for 150k. I think that is the way to go to if you want to play Unholy Decay. And currently, I do feel like it's actually quite strong. I think it's meta. I think it's one of the least meta specs of the meta specs, but it's stronger than Frost Decay. I do feel like it's way more consistent than Enhancement Shaman, and your weakness is kind of like falling and dying from physical damage. That's pretty much the same for Frost Decay. They have more defensives though, and you are going to like destroy casters in any lobby if you're inside of that. You have some PvP tons to actually help you with that as well. Unholy Decay is in a good spot. I do feel like it's still needing a rework, because I do feel like it's clamped up and you take too long to actually ramp up. But once you're ramped up, you're doing a lot of damage. I feel like Unholy Decay kind of deserves the A tier, in my opinion, for Soul Shuffle. I think that's controversial. People think Unholy Decay is not good, but it's really good. They got buffed on everything except their pets, but their pets wasn't really the build that you're going for anyways. The 4 set is underwhelming, but I would say that it's always going to be useful to go, because your Magus is still going to do 30k crits, and it will also add you a 5% damage modifier whenever they're doing it with the 4 set. So it's going to be quite interesting with Apocalypse. But Unholy Decay, A tier. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to get buffed or not, but it's the least meta spec in A tier, for sure. Warrior. So controversial. I do feel like Fury Warrior is going to be strong, but it's cheesy. It's really cheesy. You're playing around your Odin's Fury. Luckily, it's not a really long CD, but you're going to do some good damage on Bloodbath, good damage, some alright damage for Bloodthirst. You can do the hybrid build that I made like a few days ago, where you can actually have a lot of buttons to press with a lot of damage modifiers, with a lot of like damage profiles. I do feel like Fury Warrior is going to be strong. I'm going to put it in A tier. I think it's above Unholy Decay for sure. It lacks from dampening. It lacks from healing, like self-healing in dampening. It's very predictable as well. It's stoppable, but it's easier to to not get kited as a Fury Warrior than like an Arms Warrior, in my opinion. I'm just afraid for the 4-set. Whenever a 4-set is very strong, it gets really hard nerfed in a few days or a few weeks, because it's very hard. It's very easy to actually change a 4-set in PvP. It's an easy modifier. While if you're changing a spell with a modifier or not, it's actually like a dripping down effect on the whole class or spec. But if your strength is the 4-set, often or not that 4-set is going to get nerfed at some point. So for me, it's going to be 8 here, but I'm going to think that at one point, once the nerfs are going to be in, it's going to drop at B tier, but we'll have to see. Arms Warrior is going to be 8 here. You see, I'm not biased, by the way, because I'm an Arms Warrior. I put Arms and Elemental Shaman, my 2 specs, in S tier because I do feel like they're going to be very strong. It doesn't mean that it's like OP, it just means that it fits the meta perfectly. Arms Warrior just plays well with any spec. You can have very bad lobbies, but even then you have the tools to actually deal some okay damage whenever you're hitting the guys. The changes to Skull Splitter actually made Skull Splitter very interesting to play around with Arms Warrior. If you want to check the video, please check the video. I think the 4-set is also very interesting compared to the previous 4-set. Execute is having like a big place into the gameplay, and I know that in PvE you're not very satisfied about the tier set, but I think in PvP having a tier set revolved around Execute and Rend is actually a good thing in my opinion. So I'm actually very happy about it. I think your PvP downs are in a great spot. I wish people actually copied what Arms Warrior is for PvP, so the PvP downs and such, to put it on the same class specs, for example, DKs or mages or whatever. So you have choices. Right now, a lot of classes don't really have choices in PvP towns sections, but Arms Warrior has plenty of choices, and that's actually a good thing. So it means that you have like some thinking needed to actually play some PvP and think, okay, in that situation I'm going to play those talents, in that situation I'm going to play with these talents. And I hope that at one point, people are going to realize, look, we need to have the same templates from Arms Warrior towards other specs. It doesn't need to be one-to-one like the spells, but it needs to be like you have choices to make. And right now, you don't really have choices to make, for example, for mages, in my opinion. Let's talk about Retribution Paladin. Retribution Paladin is going to be S tier as well. It's unchanged, a lot of bug fixes. 4-set is actually okay, although I think playing around the 4-set is very hard, so I do feel like there is a world where you're not playing with 4-set and you're going for full stats. But don't quote me, you'll have to wait until we have a guide up on the channel or someone else is talking about Retribution Paladin. I think Retribution Paladin is a good spot. I think it's very strong, especially in Social where you have a lot of utility. You can save a lot of people with Bob. I know that some people are still complaining about survivability for Retribution Paladin, but Retribution Paladin is one of the most sturdiest classes right now in the game because of their self-defenses. And yes, the self-healing is atrocious, and I hope they change it at one point. But right now, Retribution Paladin is actually in a good spot, and I think people are like not realizing until like you see the ladder having a lot of Retribution Paladin at the top end. Let's talk about Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin is in a good spot. I think meta spot, it's very strong. Personally, I can't wait to do 2s with a Holy Paladin. I will be playing Shokadin kind of much. Like I will have a lot of damage because it has a lot of damage with Denounce, with the Glimmers, with the Shocks. You have a lot of ways to deal damage as a Holy Paladin. But I think in 3s it's very hard to do so, but you can play like melee wings if you want to. I think it's a very fun spec overall. I think it's also like a fantastic rework spec. I think healers should be having the same kind of design where you have choices to make, but that you have a streamlined class spec where you can actually do a lot of stuff with just one build. I think Holy Paladin is in a great spot. It does a lot of healing. It does suffer from mana these days now because it did get nerfed on Daybreak, but we'll have to see. But I think it's still in a great spot and right now a meta spec for healers. Let's talk about Disc Priest. Priest in general. I think Disc Priest is going to be a fantastic spec. I think they still suffer from a lot of stuff. Again, dampening. I think also having to build mastery to have throughput. It's going to be a bit annoying, but I'm going to put in A tier because of the fact that it does a lot of damage. And right now the damage is streamlined, so it means that it's way easier to do so. Having big penances can actually like destroy someone or full heal someone. It's a great spec overall to play. I think it's also very fun to play, but that's another discussion. Made also top 5 or top 6 previously, so please check that out. I think Disc Priest is in a great spot. I do feel like right now Disc Priests are bound to get a few nerfs in these coming weeks because it is very strong right now damage wise. Unfortunately, I don't like them to nerf damage. I prefer them to like change something towards the healing. I prefer them also to shift mastery into something else. That also augments a bit of the damage. Could be also very fun to play around too, but I don't know if they're going to do that at one point. But I do feel like this priest right now, they have the tools, they have the utilities, they have the defensives, they have the damage, they have the healing, whatever you're building, right? I think you can also just swing games because of your presence. I think it's an 8-tier spec right now. Shadow Priest, I'm going to make people be mad about me, but I think it's an 8-tier spec. It has loads of CC, it has options, it has damage. Although you have to cast way more, you're still one of the more tankier classes in the game. Yes, you're very prone to CC. Yes, you're immobile. Yes, you have to cast, but you're the only spec that can actually set up CC so easily just with focus macros. You don't need to CC the DPS. Just CC the healer and your mate can actually do the damage onto the DPS, and you as well can also do a lot of damage onto the DPS. You can also have a lot of damage from the foreset, but I'm not going to talk too much about the foreset because I feel like it's going to be reworked at one point, but we'll have to see. But right now, Shadow Priest is in a great spot. I think people are like not liking the gameplay. They're not liking that they are needing to cast a lot. Yes, you only have like 2 schools of spells. One is just a proc, and the other one is just Shadow, unfortunately. And then you have also Holy to heal yourself, of course. But overall, I do feel like it's a contender of being one of the best casters in the game because of the CC capacities. I think people are like still not realizing how good the CC is of a Shadow Priest, but that by themselves they can actually win games. And you have some okay damage even if you have to cast, or even without casting you have some damage. But I can understand why people don't like it, but it doesn't mean that it's not that's bad. The same for Demonology Warlock. I do understand that some people don't like the spec. Me too, I don't like the spec, but it's still going to be strong. It's there, up there with CC. I think Shadow Priest has the best CC in the game for a caster, which can be set up by themselves. Very strong. Also instant, and just need to be very aware of the healer whereabouts, pretty much. Holy Priest, that is the class spec that is the most hard to rate. I'm not gonna lie if I'm going to say that it's really just a prediction of a prediction, I would say, because I don't really know if they're very much stronger than 10.1 or if they're like stronger in 10.2. So just for that, I'm going to put in 8 here because I think their damage is still there. I think the healing proportions are not really that nerfed, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm mistaken, please let me know in the comment section below about Holy Priest, because I might be mistaken about it. I do feel like I test way more on Disc Priest than on Holy Priest. That's why I'm more confident about Disc Priest. But Holy Priest, they still have like insane healing. I do feel like the healing is very backwards, where you do want people to be very low to be able to heal a lot. But you guys tell me about Holy Priest. I really don't know about that. Let's talk about druids. Resto druid is going to be the best healer in the game. I think it's very strong. You have the possibility to now play offensively in 3s, although it's going to be very hard to do so. But if you're like 3-form and you have all the hots on your target, you can actually spam Wrath instantly and do a lot of damage. They buffed Wrath damage too. I think the few changes that they got is very interesting. I do feel like it's on the way to get nerfed, but we'll have to see. But I'm very happy with how they changed Resto Druid to be very relevant, but we have to see if it's going to be obnoxious or not to play against. You have bad lobbies as Resto Druid. Again, I think Evoker is very annoying to play against, but I think Resto Druid right now is in a good spot, so for me it's going to be a meta spec. Mistweaver, I think Mistweaver is going to be... I do want to put it on S tier, but I think they don't really have a lot of like... I'm going to put it in A tier, or S tier. The foresight is actually giving you a lot of free healing. I'm going to put it top of A tier. I do feel like it's very strong. You have fist weaving as well, don't forget about that. But I do feel like the throughput of Mistweavers is very important and very strong. I think just in general, mana is not really an issue anymore, in my opinion. They still have a lot of like CDs that they can press to save the whole team. It has a lot of mobility. It can die in stance, but if you're like very smart, you put your portal somewhere where you're not going to get reached, and it's going to be quite nice as well. I'm going to say for healers, it's very hard to actually judge in Solo Shuffle because it's tied to a lot of specs. If a spec is strong, for example, if Affliction Warlock is very strong, it's very hard for, let's say, a Holy Priest or a Disc Priest right now, because you can't fade this spell anymore for free, or you cannot mass this spell for free like you did back in the day. Right now, you're going to get punished, and for example, Mistweaver Monks is going to be very strong versus Affliction Warlock because they can revival and dispel everything for free without backlash. So everything is like kind of connected, and you have to see if a spec is going to be very strong or not because of that. But right now I think the healer meta is pretty much in that shape. Resto Shaman being the least better, like the least interesting spec of the like power level wise. Let's talk about Feral Druid. I think Feral Druid is going to be insane, but I'm going to still put it in A tier. Oops. Okay. I'm still going to put it in A tier. I think it's in a great spot. Overall, yeah, I still think it's better than Assassination Rogue though. The foresight is insane. It's really just a damage boost. You can actually just spam Feral Frenzy with your PvP talent if you're doing it correctly with Cyclone. Your damage is through the roof. Ferocious Bite does a lot of damage. It's insane. I think it's really a contender of being meta, but I do feel like it gets stopped by a few specs, and that's why I'm putting it in A tier. But I'm very, very close of putting it in S tier. Balanced Druid is going to be very strong as well. I'm going to put it in A tier. I'm going to put it in S tier. I think it's very strong. Cyclone is still the best CC out there. I still think your damage is very instant. You can really just hit the switch on something and you can destroy someone. And the damage is buffed. I think Mouse Ray is also way more easy to play around, since you don't need to have a Moonfire or Sunfire every single time, because you will have some proportion that is active at all times, and then you have Moonfire and Sunfire actually buffing your the other half of the Mouse Ray, which is a good thing. I think overall Balance Druid is in a great spot damage wise. I think it's also very close of getting a nerf. I think Cyclone is really close of getting a nerf, I think. But right now Balance Druid is going to be S tier, and I really look forward to the next season to see if I'm right about that. Let's talk about mages. Fire Mage is going to be insane. I'm going to put it in S tier. It does a lot of damage. Foresight is actually adding more damage to it. I think I'm going to put it in A tier, sorry, because it's very squishy. It's still going to be interesting to play against, and I can still imagine a world where they're going to be even lower depending on the burst that you have to face. But I do feel like Fire Mage is a really good spot, like damage wise, so I'm going to put it in A tier. Frost Mage does a lot of damage. It's really a foresight that is playing around Glacial Spike again. I'm going to put it in A tier because it does insane damage. It is very annoying to kill. It's very slippery, slows the whole team. In Solo Shuffle you can have very good lobbies and also very bad ones, but I do feel like you're probably more close of getting good lobbies instead of bad lobbies. So for me, it's going to be A tier as well. Arcane Mage, I'm going to put in B tier. Maybe 8. I'm going to put in 8 here. Sorry, Foresight is actually very strong. Arcane Missiles is actually hitting like a truck. It's very slippery. It's one of the most tankiest specs out there if you're playing correctly. You can actually regen a lot of HP that is gone. You are very slippery. You're very annoying to face. You want to target the Arcane Mage, but whenever you're doing it, it feels like you're like hitting versus sand. It always recovers. So for me, it's going to be a 8 tier spec, but it's highly dependent on the skill of the player, in my opinion. Let's talk about Survival Hunter. Survival Hunter is going to be 8 tier. I think the damage is there. I think it's higher than Unholy DK. The damage is there. I think the overall build diversity is none. You don't really have that. But the Foresight is interesting. I think you can really make them feel like S tiers if you like a Big Max, for example. But overall, being slippery is a good thing. I do feel like defensives. The issue is defensives wise, they're getting gutted because of like Feign Death not dispelling anymore. So that might be very, very hard to play. I'm going to put in B tier. I'm sorry. I think Big Max will still make them feel S tier, by the way, but losing the dispel is pretty big for Survival Hunter. I don't know how they are going to balance it, but they will need some help defensive wise. It's very close to A tier, by the way. That's why I'm going to put it in B tier, like high B tier. But yeah, I don't know if they are going to be able to recover from that nerf, because it's a pretty big nerf in my opinion. So BM Hunter is going to be B tier. I think it's very strong. I do feel like Destruction Warlock is very high. I think it's very strong. I think it's interesting how the Force is going to interact. They changed a few builds possibilities on BM Hunter. I don't know if it's going to be very strong like I think it will be, but I do feel like it's going to be strong at how I can predict it to be. I think the CC is going to be somewhat here, although it's breakable. You still have Diamond Eyes. You will also suffer from the Feign Death nerf that you got from Survival Tactics, but overall, as a BM Hunter, you don't lose damage if you're getting trained. You kind of have Scatter to actually gain and win some time. You have some traps to actually make them immobilized. You have ways to actually kite to a point where you're going to survive and feel more tanky. While Survival Hunter has the same tools, but it does feel like, again, if you want to deal damage, you still have to be melee. You have a ranged proportion, but the best damage possible that you can do is melee at all times. While BM Hunter really doesn't have that issue. MM Hunter, ooh, huge topic. Huge topic. I still think it's A tier. They changed the Foresight now to have double tap pretty much on the Foresight. So every 10 focus, you have a 3% chance of resetting your rapid fire and making it shoot 100% more bullets. So pretty much a double tap, and it can reset multiple times throughout a minute. The issue is it will be nerfed in PvP, so it will be 50% stronger, but it's kind of the same as double tap, to be honest. They added double tap on the Foresight because they don't know what to do with MM, pretty much. That's what I feel and how it is. So right now, rapid fire is hitting like a truck. Your 2-set is like giving you more damage on rapid fire. Your 4-set is going to give you even more damage on rapid fire, and it's going to be a great spec damaging wise. The issue is, again, getting trained, knowing how to kite and knowing how to survive. But I think it's easier to do so as a hunter than a caster, because you don't have to cast or you don't get interrupted while casting. Overall, MM Hunter is right now hitting insanely high. I don't know if they're going to do anything about it. I know that in SOLOQ RBGs is going to be a pain to face, but right now in Solo Shuffle, I think also it will be a very strong spec going into 10.2. Having Demon Hunter is going to be S tier. Since it got reworked, it is actually very, very strong. It has a lot of tools that it didn't really have. They got better pretty much. They got just better. I think the damage is also at an all-time high right now, and I'm not looking forward to play against a Demon Hunter in general. It is killable without blur, without darkness, but they have so much mobility. It's actually very insane and very hard to face one, in my opinion. And I didn't put Windwalker anywhere, but I'm going to put it in. I want to put it in A tier, but I'm going to put it in B tier. But the same level, Survival Hunter, I do feel like it's strong, but they do lose the foreset from Season 2. And Season 2 foreset was actually making them hit like a truck and do a lot of damage. And that's why I'm going to put it in B tier, because they do lose that. But normally it should be A tier, but I feel like if I have to compare with the other specs, I think it deserves a B tier in my opinion. It's very hard to actually judge Windwalker right now, because I do feel like it depends about the meta overall. I could be right, or I could be giga wrong. It could be S tier, right? But right now I do feel like it's Windwalker B tier. Let's talk step by step which one are the strongest in solo shuffle. So I think Retribution Paladin is stronger than Subtlety Rogue, but I do feel like Arms Warrior is stronger than Demon Hunter. But Sub-Rogue is stronger than Arms. Elemental Shaman is the best caster with... I would say Augmentation Evoker is the best caster, then you have Elemental Shaman, then Balance Druid. Restoration Druid is the best healer. Again, I judge melee, ranged, and healer separately. I think Feral Druid is the best A tier. I think Unholy Decay is the worst A tier. It should be very close to B tier, to be honest. Destruction Warlock is very close to being S tier, but I think it's getting stopped by a few things. Hunter is actually the second best caster with Shadow Priest. I think it's tied. Then you have Fire, Frost, and Arcane, and BM Hunter being the last of the ranged ones in A tier. You have Mistweaver Monks being better than Holy Paladin, being better than Evoker, being better than Disc Priest, and then Holy Priest is a random thing. I really don't know. It's very hard to judge Holy Priest in my opinion. Survival Hunter is the best of B tier, but again, if you're like very skillful, you can make him feel like S tier. Windwalker is B tier too, and Shaman is also B tier, and Outlaw Rogue and Frost Decay are the least best B tiers. You have Demonology Warlock, Affliction Warlock being B tier, but good. It's not bad, but good. And Restoration Shaman is the worst healer currently for me. And Devastation Evoker is still going to be cheese tier, so you pretty much cheese or you're going to get busted, in my opinion. Again, it's a tier list. It is not factual. It is a prediction. I could be wrong, I could be right. It actually doesn't matter, because we have 10.2 coming out in like a few days. So if you want to check out my latest prediction about BlizzCon, you can click on one of those links. If you want to check my classes that I've chosen going into 10.2, you can also click on one of those links. And we will see each other probably very soon in the next video. Bye.